This is Mike and Ham from Please Pause. Meron kaming munting podcast where we talk about all things TV and film. And despite that, surprisingly, we are still married.
Control freak ka kasi sa podcast na to.
30 seconds lang po ang meron tayo. Pakibilisan.
From blockbusters to classics, superheroes to love teams, hit series to teleseries, join us as we have meaningful and meaningless conversations on the stuff we watched. Someday, mababago ka rin ang tagline na yan.
Check out Please Pause on Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Spotify, and other major podcast platforms.
See you there!
For more local podcasts, check out more shows from Pilipinas Indie Podcast and Entertainment Network.
Hype Network presents.
Welcome to your unfiltered Tagalog Wrestling Podcast. This is the THEMTG Show Podcast. Hey yo! Welcome to your unfiltered Tagalog Wrestling Podcast. And this is the MTG Show Podcast, a wrestling podcast. Okay, welcome to the show. So for this week's podcast, wow. Ito na nga ang sinasabi ko. Kasi we're only 5 episodes away before episode 100. And sa sobrang excited ko, hindi ko alam kung paano ko i-organize lahat ng mga parating na eps. To be honest, 3 weeks before WrestleMania, may isa akong special episode. No? Next week, ata. O next 2 weeks before Mania. Basta before Mania ko siya i-drop. Tapos, marami pa tayong dapat abangan here on the show, especially pagka nakatapak na 100, 101, whatever. Pero definitely, marami kayong dapat abangan dito sa podcast na to. Especially on WrestleMania. So, WrestleMania, I'm not going to do the bullshit that happened last year. Na-divide ko yung episodes. No, hindi ko siya gagawin ngayon. Wala akong pakialam kahit pag 2 hours ako ma-podcast dito. Pero hindi ko rin alam. Di ko alam kung ano magiging plano ko on WrestleMania. And sa fallout ng WrestleMania, pag ginawa ko na yung review, ang makakasigurado ko, divided ata. Ang predictions, hindi ko i-divide. Ang results o yung fallout, hindi. Kailangan na siya, separate siya. Kasi it's a long episode. For sure. If hindi ko siya pagkasamahan. Diba? Okay. So for this week's podcast, so syempre this is a unfortunate week for everyone here, not only in professional wrestling scene, kundi sa buong mundo kasi sobrang nalulungkot tayo when Scott Hall or Razor Ramon, nakilala nyo sa WWF, passed away at the age of 62? 62 ba? I'm not sure, 62 o 60? Hindi ko sure. Kasi hindi ko nagsisilip yung details niya early in the day. Pero sobrang nalulungkot ako on Scott Hall's status. Few days before he passed away, so the confirmation was announced on Raw this week. Confirmation yun. I mean, the confirmation of death. Tapos, in-announce ni Kevin Nash on his Instagram that tatanggalan na ng life support si Scott kasi inatake nga siya and fortunately, ayun na, yun na yung nangyari. Sunod-sunod na yung nangyari. Inatake siya due to his, I think, successful yung operation niya, if I'm not mistaken. Kasi inatake siya sa hospital, if hindi ako nagkakamali. And now, Ayun na nga. Sobrang sakit sa atin itong pagkawala ni Scott Hall. Hindi natin mapapagkakaila yun. Diba? As a wrestling fan na hindi ko naabutan si Scott Hall, and ang katangi-tanging moment na alam ko about Scott Hall is his WrestleMania 10 match versus Shawn Michaels. Yun lang ang alam kong moment niya. Aside sa NWO, ibang story na yun. But definitely, this is my favorite moment of Scott Hall na gustong gusto kong i-check out nyo sa takdang panahon if you wanted to check it out. I think WWE Network is open. Naka-open nata yung library, yung mga memories ni Scott sa network. If you want to check it out, check it out. Pero for now, ito, I'm going to take a moment of silence for Mr. Scott Hall. And then we're going to take a immediate commercial break. And when we come back, mag-i-start tayo sa ating regular podcast. Typical regular podcast programming dito po sa MTG Show. So, let's pause for a moment. And let's pray for the internal repose of Mr. Scott. We're going to take a break. Thank you.
Gusto niya bang malaman kung paano kami nakikipag-collab sa mga brands in the MT Show podcast? We use Podmetrics, the easiest way to monetize your podcast. If meron kang podcast, sign up now at podmetrics.co and use my code THEMTGSHOWPOD to get full control on how you monetize your show regarding of its size. Again, sign up now at podmetrics.co and use my code THEMTGSHOWPOD. If you're an advertiser who wants to collab with us, head on over to advertiser.podmetrics.co and fill up the form. Again, Podmetrics, the easiest way to monetize your podcast.
Okay, we're good. Ayan, so Mr. Scott Hall, may rest in peace. Kasama ka sa mga prayers ko. Sa atin. Sobrang sakit. As a fan, wrestling fan, sobrang sakit. Okay, let's go to the main dish of this week's podcast. Let's talk about SmackDown first. So, ito na nga eh. Ito na yung sinasabi ko sa TikTok eh. Bigla ako napabalik sa TikTok dahil sa putang inang to. Fuck. Pag sinabi niyong Butch, ano yung una niyong naiisip? Aside sa ring name ni Pete Dunne. Come on, people. I know WWE is better than this. Pero, ano nakagulat pa ba yung mga ganitong changes? Seriously? Nakagulat pa ba to? Tatangin ko kayo, nakagulat pa ba itong mga name changes na to? Kasi ako hindi na ako nagulat eh. Hindi na ako nagulat na we're going to get this name change. And medyo flat sa akin yung naging explanation nila. So that's why Pete Dunne's going to get a name change na para magkakaibigan sila, Sheamus, si Rich Holland, tsaka si Butch, Pete Dunne. So, anong masasabi ko? Ang simpleng thought ko lang talaga. Sinabi ko na to sa TikTok na sobrang expected na itong name change kasi NXT 2.0 is developmental brand after all. And hindi siya main roster, hindi rin siya part ng Big 3. Actually, Big 2 nga lang dapat eh. Ang bonus nga lang ang NXT. Pero hindi na siya Big 3. It's Raw and SmackDown na lang. NXT will always be a developmental brand. And remember, kung ano yung ginagawa ng developmental brand na yun, developmental, whatever it is, it always be a change na mangyayari. swerte mo kung wala mo kukuhang change. Ang malas mo, para kang si Butch. Hindi ko mapigil. Gusto ko lang maging professional dito. Pero, pagpakatotoo na tayo, hindi na talaga ako nagulat sa name change. Name change, para kang sirang plaka na araw-araw na lang nagrarant sa company just for this sake. But for real, I hate the idea. Dahil ito lang naman pakatotoo na tayo. WWE is sacrificing everything just para lang masolo nila yung yung pagmamarket sa talent. So, Pete Dunne is not a WWE name. Nadala na siya sa main roster. Sa NXT. Before pa na mapalitan. O, di ba, nagbabalak nga sila na magkaroon din ng new name, Pete Dunne, prior to that. And, kung natatandaan niyo si Gunta, na dating Walter, ay nag-debut sa WWE under Walter. Hindi Gunta, na hindi naman pangalan na galing sa WWE. Diba? Kaya hindi na rin talaga ako nagulat sa name change na to ni Butch o ni Pete Dunne. O sa mga fans, sa ibang fans, siguro magagalit kayo kasi kinasanayan nyo na yung Pete Dunne. Pero in the end of the day, it's business. Will always be a business. And whatever Vince does in his business, wala tayong magagawa lahat. It's just a puppet. Parang puppet na kailangan mo lang pagandahin o pagwapuhin na pinapagalaw ng isang director. At the end of the day, hindi tayo director. Ano lang tayo? Manonood lang tayo o viewer lang tayo. Pwede tayo mag-criticize, pero in the end of the day, hindi tayo papakinggan. Wala tayong magagawa doon. Diba? Kundi, wala tayong magagawa kundi mag-criticize, pero hindi tayo papakinggan. Hindi nga tayo sure kung pinapakinggan tayo. Diba? Yun na eh. Next item. So, Big E is unfortunately injured from the match aside dun sa nangyari nga kay Butch. So, si Rich Holland nag-execute ng wrong move para to sa context. And then, Big E accidentally falls with his neck first on the arena floor. So, unfortunately, injured niya yung leg o neck ni Big E. Sobrang unfortunate nun. Ayoko magsalita about the injury because number one, I'm not a professional. Hindi ako professional. And hindi rin ako doktor para magsalita about sabihin ko na kasalanan to ni Rich Holland kasi blah 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 blah. No, people. Seriously. Shut the fuck up. Kung hindi ka doktor, kung hindi ka experienced guy or experienced na tao, shut the fuck up. Hindi ginusto ni Holland to nangyari. Hindi rin lalo ginusto ni Big E to nangyari. Definitely. And people are pissed. They're blaming Rich Holland, Botchamania guy, kinoconnect pa nila sa issue ni Johnny Gargano before. Man, shut the fuck up. Yun lang ang masasabi ko. If wala kang experience, shut the fuck up. Hindi mo naranasan magkaroon ng bumps. Kung hindi mo naranasan itong mga ganito, shut the fuck up. Ganun lang kasimple. Aman ko, bakit kayo nagagalit kay Holland eh? Hindi nga ang ginusto. Ano magagawa natin? Diba? People, I'm going to say this for the last time. If hindi ka experienced na tao and you're continuing blaming Rich Holland due to the injury, normally blame. Pero yung i-blame mo na parang paano mo binilame si Paige dati o si Sasha dahil dun sa accident. That's accident, obviously. If you don't know about wrestling, kung hindi ka nagte-train, wala kang karapatang magbigay ng opinion. Sorry, sorry nag-gatekeep ako dito. Pero it sounds like that. Wala kasing imposible kasi na sabihin ng fans na ganito. Imposibleng sabihin natin na, okay, kasalanan naman ni Haaland yan, okay lang yan. No, it's obviously, now, come on people, you're better than that. Awa ko nga sa inyo kung ano mga pinagkakakain nyo, pinagbe-blame nyo kay Haaland eh. Si Haaland is just a guy who wants to execute that move. And people, ang hindi ko maintindihan sa inyo, bakit niya sinisisi sa kanya yung mistake na alam ko pareha sila may kasalanan. Diba? Pero regardless, I want to give Big E support din, syempre. And I wish him the good luck and syempre get well. Magbubuo na tayo sa ating susunod na item for SmackDown. So yan, I want to give a props to Sami Zayn. So Sami Zayn did a really good job on doing his best on that storyline versus Johnny Knoxville. So this is one of the best storylines of SD right now, no doubt, regardless on stuff. Ito talaga yung isa sa mga best stories ng SmackDown right now. Wala kasi akong pakialam. Ang top stories lang naman ng SmackDown ngayon. Number 1 is the Brock Roman. Number 2 ito. Number 3 is Ronda Ronda Charlotte. Yun lang. Kung magdi-disagree kayo sa akin, wala akong pake. Pero, yun lang talaga naiisip ko when it comes to SmackDown right. Raw, there's a lot of open spaces. So we got AJ Styles, we got Edge, we got the Kevin Owens thing, we got the desperation thing of Rollins, and we got Cody Rhodes that I don't want to talk about it. And then, a lot of stuff that we need to talk about Raw. SmackDown nga, tatatlo nga ata ang top stories ng SmackDown. Nakakala mo hindi nangyayari. Diba? Papaisip ka na nga lang na, ito pala yun. Okay. Yun lang, ganun lang naman. At the end of the day. Yan, tuloy natin. So, last thing on SmackDown, bago tayo mag-move on sa ating second item sa Raw. So, let's talk about Pat McAfee. I don't know, but I love Pat McAfee's aggression on this one versus Austin Theory. Pero, bitch, please. Eto, when I said bitch, please, nakikiusap ako. Siyempre, makikiusap ako na sana, habang nagkukumpit si Pat McAfee, humanap muna kayo ng temporary sub sa commentary. Kasi hindi naman sa ayoko kay Pat. Pero sana may temporary mo nang pumalit sa kanya habang okay magtatlo na yung commentary dyan para just in case na ma-assault ulit si Pat dyan, walang mangyayaring walang story na mangyayari na mauulit na naman yung kay Jerry Lawler tsaka kay Michael Cole story na yan. Sobrang nabibs ako dong, diba naalala nyo hindi na ata nasub ni Michael Cole yung remaining match which is the main event of Mania. I think hindi talaga. I think hindi niya natuloy yun. Kasi yun yasa nangyari sa kanya. Na-fuck up siya. Pero regardless, kung ano man ang pinag-iisip natin, syempre there's a lot of possibilities naman na naka-open for that match between Pat McAfee and Austin Theory. And gusto ko lang mag-grow muna tong story na to. Sa predictions night natin sa Mania, doon natin pag-uusapan yung mga importanteng bagay na I wanted to discuss on that one. So for now, ito muna yung aking SmackDown thoughts and let's move on to Raw. Okay? So there's a lot of things that I like on Raw. Number 1 is the Edge new theme song. So niretiro na nga ng Metalingus ng Alter Bridge and pinalitan siya ng Other Side. And sa unang impression ko sa Other Side, akala ko tugtog na akala ko kanta ng ni Deb Rebel buti hindi nila inisip na ilagay si Deb Rebel dito. I'm glad that they didn't. I'm glad na ganun yung ginawa nila kay Deb ay kay Edge. So that's a +1 for me. And I love how he explains his new gimmick. Take note, hindi to rated R superstar ha. Kasi sobrang ibang-iba na to sa rated R superstar. And sobrang iba na rin to sa opportunist edge. Hindi na yan yun. Hindi na, kung rated R superstar pa to, edi sana ginamit niya na lang yung Metalingus. Pero hindi eh. Ibang-iba na to sa character niya dati. Ibang-iba na rin siya sa character nito lang. And mas marami ka pang dapat abangan sa character na to, kaya mag-tune in ka sa Raw. Kung gusto mo mag-tune in minus Cody Rhodes, mag-tune in ka dito. Marami ka naman maabangan dito. Especially the AJ Styles story, which is I love the most. Aside dito talaga yung nagugustuhan kong story. Diba? Then, ito. Let's talk about Raw. +1 dagdag natin to KO Rollins story. Ito, the fun fact here is KO and Seth closed the show this week in a match just for a spot at WrestleMania. The spot is the interview with Stone Cold Steve Austin. I don't know kung matatawa ako. Regardless, the match is, I love the match. I love the match. Every Rollins KO match is a banger for sure. Pero, ewan ko, nawiwirduan ako sa ideya na maglalaban sila in the main event just for an interview spot. I love the idea, but like what I said, it's very obvious that KO will win. Si Rollins kasi hindi ako umaasa na lalaban siya sa Mania o lalabanan niya si Cody sa Mania. It's kinda weird. It's kinda weird for me. Ewan ko nga sa mga nagpapaniwala niya sa mga rumor na lalaban do si Cody sa Mania. O magde-debut daw si Cody sa Mania. Ewan ko ba, ano mga sapak meron kayo? Ano bang meron sa inyo, man? Patotoo na tayo. Ano bang meron? Ano bang big deal kay Cody ngayon? Ha? Hindi ko maintindihan sa inyo eh. Yan ang hindi ko maintindihan sa inyo eh. Kung ano ba ang meron kay Cody? Aside sa, 'di ba, ayaw natin sa kanya sa AEW. So, what's the point of liking him in WWE? It's kinda confusing. It's kinda confused me the most. Let me know in the comments. I-preview ko to. Ano bang gusto niyo kay Cody? Ano bang gusto niyo kay Cody na nasa WWE siya kumpara sa Cody na nasa AEW? Let me know in the comments, especially in TikTok. Kasi gusto ko rin talaga sumagot ng questions niya. So, magtanong kayo, nakikiusap ako, please, magtanong kayo sa TikTok kasi sasagot ako ng mga tanong niyo sa TikTok. So, yeah. Mag-iwan kayo ng mga questions niyo sa TikTok. So, tapos na ako sa main roster shows sa ating podcast this week. So, ayan, we're going to take our first major break here in the podcast. So, ayun, before we go to the commercial break, next week na nga pala ang birthday sale ng Lazada, 10-year anniversary sale of Lazada. So if you want to support the podcast by your online shopping on Lazada, please use my link on the description below or podlink.co/6gs. Malaking tulungan sa akin here on the podcast with no extra cost to you. So, let's check out other ka-podcast here on Pipe Network.
Sandy. Tara na, mag-record na tayo. Okay, sige. Kuya.
This is 480 TV Pod.
The 482nd TV After Show podcast.
This season, we are going to talk about the Falcon and the Winter Soldier.
Tune in every Sundays wherever you get your podcast
480 TV Pod.
from Pipe Network.
Sige na, manood ka na. Diyan ka naman magaling.
You are listening to the MTG Show Podcast, an unfiltered Tagalog wrestling podcast where they talk about anything and everything about professional wrestling. Speaking of professional, we are professionally going to segue to our own show, Rule 20 Podcast, where the only professional thing we do are done mostly off the record, behind the cam, and under the sheets. Again, that's Rule 20, available wherever you are listening to this right now. And now back to the podcast.
Okay, so we're back on the podcast. We're here on the half of the podcast this week kasi wala naman headliners. No? So ito, in-announce na rin natin, address din natin. So Charmel is now part of WWE Hall of Fame 2022 class. So kung hindi nyo kilala si Charmel ay yung kasama ni King Booker dati sa story sa SmackDown. Kung di ako nagkakamali. Ako, masasabi ko lang, there's a lot of spots in this year's Hall of Fame. Sana madagdagan pa to. Sana lumawak pa yung spot. Pero no disrespect to Charmel. Pero may mas deserve pa talaga sa kanya. So, that's why she deserves the spot. But definitely, sa tingin ko marami pang may deserve sa spot na yon. So, yeah, yun lang sa akin. Ewan ko sa inyo kung ano masasabi nyo kay Charmel on her induction. So, let me know in the comments syempre sa mga tweets nyo sa TikTok kung ano yung gusto nyo or ayaw nyo kay Charmel. Let me know in the comments. Yun lang. So, let's talk about NXT now. So, NXT 2.0, I don't know but wala akong pakialam sa mga opinion nyo. This is the best NXT. This is the best WWE program right now. Mag-agree kayo, mag-disagree kayo, wala akong pake. But definitely, this is the best WWE program right now. I don't know why people hating on 2.0, but definitely we're getting almost, I'm not going to say that, the same 2.0 treatment, but definitely you're getting the same stuff that you used to be on NXT, black and gold. But the difference is some spots is sobrang mature eh. Sobrang mature na ng NXT. So of course, di mo na makukuha yun sa 2 point sa black and gold dati na kasi puro action yun NXT na yun, di ba? Obviously, NXT before is pure action, less talk or less shit. But now, here in 2.0, we're almost getting the same NXT. I don't know why people hating on NXT. Kasi uso. Kasi uso, I don't know. But okay, let's start with this shit. So, let's talk about Miss TV. I love the main roster crossovers here. I don't know why people hating on this. Pero definitely, I love the idea of having Miss TV on NXT 2.0. Especially on this time of road to WrestleMania. I know there's a build pa rin between Rey Mysterio, Dominic, and sino nga to? Si Logan Paul, si Miz. Pero wala kasi akong pake sa match na yan. Pero ito, nagka-interest ako bigla kasi there's a big star na binibuild din sa spot na yun. So, it's LA Knight. Sana mag-debut din siya after Mania. I wish he can debut after Mania sa SD kasi dagdag big name din yon si LA Knight sa SmackDown. Sana hindi baguhin yung pangalan niya kasi and gimmick, obviously, baka magbago na naman. Kasi if I remember NXT 2.0, dami na bagong si Ciampa nagbago yung gimmick. Si Ganta nagbago ng pangalan and possible magbago din ng gimmick. Si Butch, di na ako magkasalita about Butch kasi sobrang obvious what yung ginawa nila. Okay, let's start with the Miss TV. I love the Miss TV. Yung nagsama-sama si Dolph, si LA Knight, si Miss, three of the biggest mouths in professional wrestling in one ring is definitely a +1. So, and then let's move on to Santos Escobar versus Cameron Grimes. I don't know but I love this match. Sobrang action-packed itong match na to this week on 2.0. So, Santos gets the win and moves on to the ladder match at Stand and Deliver. Now, will take place on Sunday, April 3. Same day as WrestleMania. Pero, madaling araw to ipapalabas. So, kung gusto niyo panoorin, manood kayo, pupuyat kayo. And then, so, A-Kid debuts on NXT 2.0 as well. So, he defeated Kushida And magpo-proceed din siya sa isang qualifying match versus Grayson Waller for next week's NXT 2.0 for a spot din sa ladder match na for the North American Championship. So ako, sobrang gusto ko talaga yung run so far ni Carmelo Hayes. Ewan ko sa mga ba't marami nag-o-object dito. But definitely, I love his reign so far. And sobrang superb ng run niya for me. It's just for me, para sa akin. I love his reign as NXT North American Champion. And then, sige, let's talk about Tiffany Stratton. I don't know, sa mga anime fans dito, siguro masasabi ko sa inyo makaka-relate kayo sa sasabihin ko sunod eh. Kasi sobrang brilliant ni Tiffany Stratton dito. 'Di ba pag sa anime, pag nagta-transform siya, saka kalalakas. Ang ginawa ni Stratton, if you're watching NXT na tong episode, especially this specific NXT episode, nagsusuperpower pa lang si nagta-transform pa lang si Saray. Umatake na agad si Stratton, which is a brilliant move. Hindi ko sabihin na na pangit tong stuff na to. But it's just a brilliant stuff na napanood natin sa 2.0 this week. But I'm not going to say that I like the decision though. That's a different stuff para sa akin. And then, sige, let's talk about the Ciampa farewell tour na sinasabi niya na possible na nga mag-debut siya sa Raw o SmackDown regardless of the stuff. And ayun, alababas niya si Tony D'Angelo after his promo and he confronted him and challenged him in a NXT Stand and Deliver match. So Ciampa accepts the challenge, low blows him, and that's it. That's it for the challenge of Tony D'Angelo for Stand and Deliver. So it's a +1 for me kasi puput over ni Ciampa si Tony D'Angelo for sure, or he will get a win. And then, ayun nga, bibigyan siya ng farewell with a win. So, that's a plus. Siyempre, it's a plus for me. If he wins, that's a +1 for me, for sure. If si TDA mananalo, malaking gain yun sa kanya. Lalo na sa run niya ngayon sa 2.0, diba? And then, sige, let's talk about this weird stuff by Indy Hartwell at Persia Perota. Alam mo yung natatawa ako dito kasi sabay sila nag-entrance tapos parang nag-feud sila awkwardly. Tapos ayun nga, nagkaroon nga sila ng match and then right after the match, nag-kiss off sila kasama ng respective partners nila. So, si Persia kay Doc Hudson and then si Indy kay Dexter Lumis obviously. And I don't know, it just makes me laugh, especially with this whole segment. Lalo na yung sabay sila nag-entrance, tapos yun, yung aftermath, sobrang nakakatawa ako. And yung build nito, it's kinda, sobrang dark. We're getting NXT porn on this one, so it's definitely a perk or an upgrade from the NXT Black and Gold na we're getting a lot of dark stuff. dark stuff. We're getting a dark stuff from this NXT. So it's a plus. So what if yung Black and Gold tas may dark stuff, mga ganito? It's a must plus, pero definitely tong parts na to, it's a plus din, diba? And then, so let's acknowledge Dominic Mysterio is in NXT 2.0. Ewan ko, matutuwa ako o hindi. Pero it's a plus for me. Sana magstay na matagal doon si Dominic muna. Abang wala pa naman siya ng story aside doon sa Miss Logan Paul story, siya na magstay doon si Dominic for a while. Kahit paano para ma-enhance din yung character niya and yung story niya. Tsaka, syempre, magkaroon din siya ng crowd chance kasi hindi siya na-cheer. I-cheer talaga sa Raw. I don't know. Hindi siya talaga na-cheer sa Raw, to be honest. Yun ang na-obserbahan ko eh. Hindi siya talaga na-cheer sa Raw o kaya sa SD kung nag-SD sila dati. And then, ito na nga. Ito, so nag-set na sila ng seeds for a Cora Jade Mandy Rose match at NXT Stand and Deliver. So basically, tinarap niya si JC Jade. JC Jane? Tama? Si JC Jane. Ayan, tapos nilagay niya yung title sa basurahan para kay Gigi Dalin. Kay Gigi Dolin, o Dalin, whatever. And then, kinuha ni Cora yung NXT Women's Championship. And iuwi ni sana pero tinarap siya ni Mandy Rose and we're getting a lot of tributes on this one. So, yeah. Rest in peace, Scott Holden. We're getting a lot of tributes here on this episode. So that's a plus one for me. That's for sure. And last thing before we move on to the Cora Jade thing. So I'm sure Cora is not going to win. Tama? I'm sure Cora is not going to win this one. Tama? Not for today. Hindi siya mananalo ngayon. Siguro in the later date. We want to protect Mandy. Siyempre, Mandy is the draw of tawag ba dito? Toxic attraction. Kung may matatalo sa toxic, ang sigurado ko yung isa, sila Gigi at si Jane. Diba? Yun ang sure ko. But Mandy Rose, I don't think matatalo siya ng ganong kaga. Too small ring pa. Yung ring niya ngayon, sobrang maikli pa yun sa akin. Then, let's move on to the tag titles real quick. So, there's a match confirmed on NXT 2.0 this week that Imperium will defend the championship versus MSK and sino nga to? MSK and Creed Brothers at NXT Stand and Deliver in a triple threat match. So, yeah. Hindi natin nakuha yung details kung sino yung umatake sa Creed Brothers, but at least there's a development of this story. So, we're going to discuss this on the predictions night soon. Okay, the main event this week, LA Knight challenges Dolph Ziggler for the NXT Championship. Definitely, they built LA Knight as a star right here. LA Knight is a big star here, for sure. They did the best decision of that night is this one. The best decision of that night was building up this man. And knowing Dolph as a established star, maganda yung put over niya dito, for sure. Maganda yung naging put over niya dito. And I love the idea of them fighting in the main event of 2.0 this week. And despite Dolph winning the match, there's a put over Sobrang ganda ng ideya na pinut over siya ni Dolph. Kaya sobrang gustong-gusto ko tong naging match na this week on 2.0. And then afterwards, Braun Breaker appears and challenges Dolph Ziggler in a rematch for the NXT Championship at Stand and Deliver. Dolph Ziggler accepts the challenge and closes the NXT this week. So, like it or not, people, that's the best booking decision for Stand and Deliver. Booking Dolph Ziggler, an established star, versus Braun Breaker, a rising star on 2.0. That's a perfect match for NXT 2.0. Like it or not, that's a perfect decision for NXT 2.0. Okay. So, before we continue on our podcast, let me know kung ano yung nagaganap sa inyo. Sana maayos lang kayo. We're good. And let's continue. I want to plug some plugs here first before we go. So, Shopee, katatapos lang ng 15th sale Consumer Day noong March 15. So, if you want to support the podcast and you're shopping on Shopee, lalo linggo-linggo or araw-araw may sale sa Shopee, please use my link on the description below or let's type it on your browser, podlink.co/PHX. Again, that's podlink.co/PHX. THEMTGSHOWPOD/BHX. So let's continue with our AEW Dynamite review. But before that, kasi medyo sumasakit na yung ano ko. So we're going to take a break na nga. We're going to take a break, and when we come back, we're going to talk about AEW, Dynamite, then Impact, and then yung Bullet Club story that I wanted to discuss nung una kong binariking sa TikTok a few days ago. So for now, let's check our podcast on Pipe Network.
Hey folks, my name is Rajiv Doreswamy and I'm the host of The Rajiv Show. Check out The Rajiv Show at The Rajiv Show both on Facebook and Instagram, and new episodes will be released every Wednesdays. Cheers folks, and stay safe.
Catch the Pizarra Tales weekly as we tackle issues about education and share experiences about teaching. Hosted by James Australia, available on your favorite podcast platforms.
Okay, so we're back on the podcast. It's the final stretch of the pod this week. So let's talk about Thunder Rosa winning the AEW Women's Championship. This is basically the biggest headline of this week's podcast. So Thunder Rosa beats Britt Baker in a steel cage match for the AEW Women's Championship. The match is kinda weird or weak kumpara sa AEW Revolution match nila. But this thing makes me impressed on Thunder Rosa. And she deserves the win. Long overdue na din since sobrang stale talaga ng run ni Britt Baker. No disrespect. But I think it's time na din talaga na magkaroon ng new champion sa AEW, and congrats kay Thunder Rosa. Well deserved. Long overdue. And then, we got a John Moxley, Bryan Danielson match versus Chuck Taylor and Wheeler Yuta. And after of the match, si William Regal slaps Yuta. Parang sinasign na nila ito na magkakaroon ng cracks. Actually, may cracks na nga talaga sa Best Friends with Chris Statlander erasing the paints in her face. Tapos, binubura niya na yung reference ng Best Friends sa kanya. So, it's a plus then as well. Pero, let's see pa sa mga susunod na linggo at araw kung ano pa yung magiging story ng Best Friends. Pero ayaw ko muna magsalita for now sa story nila. Then, okay, so let's talk about Jericho Appreciation Society. So, I'm glad they're getting a new name dito. And yung mga members ng 2.0 at saka si Daniel Garcia, they're getting a new nicknames. And it's kind of weird for me that Jericho is using the term sports entertainers. I don't know, it's sobrang weird na sa akin. Ayoko lang talaga ipangunahan, pero sobrang nawiwirduhan ako. And his promos lately is kinda weird. Especially this week's Dynamite. Sobrang weird ng promo ni Jericho. Especially with the sports entertainer guy. Sobrang, parang it's kinda weird for me. No CM Punk, no Eddie Kingston, no Sammy. Hindi, Sammy, wala din si Sammy, I know. And wala ring PMP, so di ko feel na may Dynamite ngayon. It's kinda sad. Okay, so let's talk about the MJF. I mean, the Wardlow thing. So, MJF screwed Wardlow. Prevention, actually, from Revolution. So, Scorpio Sky retains the title versus Wardlow, and the first guy who defeated Wardlow in a one-on-one match. So, basically, yun lang. Plus, Matt Hardy and Jeff Hardy debut as a team as Hardys. The Hardys. Yun lang. Parang, okay, nostalgia pa rin sa akin, pero it's not the same. Okay. So, basically, yun lang para sa Dynamite. AEW this week. So let's move on to more wrestling stuff. Let's start with Impact kasi i-insert ko na ulit ang Impact here in the podcast since there's only, I think, 1 month to go before AEW Impact Rebellion na magti-take place April 23. So after WrestleMania, we're going to do another predictions night and we're going to talk about Impact Rebellion. Okay, so in preparation to Impact Rebellion, let's talk about the biggest thing na nangyari on Impact in New Japan. So connected in one another tong stories na to. So basically, nangyari na ang nangyayari. Nag-execute na yung plano ni Jay White na sipain na for good o i-reject na for good ang GOD o Gorillas of Destiny and i-kick out na si Jado from the Bullet Club. So, kung napanood nyo New Japan Cup noong weekend or this past week, kitang-kita natin na ang loyalty ng halos buong Bullet Club plus Horror, House of Horror, whatever kung pangalan nila Evil, na ina-expect ko na si Evil yung unang mawawala sa Bullet Club. But now, magtyaga mo na kayo kay Evil. And now, lahat sila halos ay pinili yung side ni Jay White. So, ang hindi lang pumili, syempre, ay si Jado lang na dati ring katag team ni Jedo na ngayon ay kasama na ni Jay White sa Bullet Club. So, there's 3 devastating kickouts here in Bullet Club in the past few days. So, marami pa kayong dapat abangan sa story na to, especially with AEW, lalo sa Impact and AEW New Japan. Marami pa kayong dapat abangan dito. And naglo-look forward pa ako sa magiging stories na to. Kasi nagkaka-connect talaga sila. So, kung gusto nyo mapanood ng buo, syempre panoorin nyo New Japan. Manood din kayo sa Impact. Kasi andun din yung story ng Rebellion and possible magka-story din. Nako-connecta din sa Bullet Club story na to. Sa Rebellion pay-per-view and sa mga susunod na shows ng Impact. So, it's kinda interesting pa din. And then meanwhile, so we got Josh Alexander back in Impact Wrestling. So, that's a plus for me. And he will face Moose for the Impact Championship at a Impact event entitled Rebellion on April 23. And then, so, yun na nga. Yun na, basically, ang ating podcast this week. Kung may na-miss out ako on this week's podcast, let me know in the comments. Siyempre, nag-tribute na rin tayo kay Scott Hall. Sabi ko nga, yung best match ko, I think the best match of Scott Hall for me was the WrestleMania 10 match versus Shawn Michaels. Na ladder match, WrestleMania. If available sa WWE Network nyo, check this out. Sobrang ma-enjoy nyo yung match na yun. Promise. Ayun, so, it's time for me to for my picks of the week. So, Superstar of the Week is Dolph Ziggler winning the NXT Championship. The Woman of the Week is Thunder Rosa. Plus, obviously, next week's, yung picks of the week ko, I'm going to pick Thunder Rosa in advance. She deserves the win. I swear to God. And then, the match of the week that I picked, doon pa lang sa TikTok, alam ko nang itong mapipick ko. It's from Rampage. Isa Swerve Scott versus Tony Nese on Rampage. So, if you want to watch it on Fight o kaya sa YouTube. Free naman sa YouTube yun. So, yeah, that's pretty much it for our episode number 95 on this week's podcast. Let me know in the comments below kung ano yung masasabi nyo on this week's podcast. So, follow the podcast on all of the social media platforms. Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, Twitch, and on TikTok. Especially TikTok, na gumagawa na ulit ako ng content sa TikTok. Let me know kung ano yung mga questions nyo nga pala sa TikTok. Please, pakiiwad po sa TikTok natin. And syempre, follow the podcast on all the social media platforms at the MTG Show Pod. So follow as well the podcast on Spotify, Apple Podcast, Google Podcast, Anchor, Deezer, and the rest of the podcast platforms. Search the MTG Show Pod. So the podcast is also available on the MTG Show Podcast app for Android phones. And please rate the podcast nga pala on Spotify and on Apple Podcast. 5 stars or 6 in Japan. So, and also please follow me on Instagram and Twitter at AGPenera. And syempre, ayun nga pala, please support Pipe Network, especially with their shows Tao Ba To? And yung the rest of the Pipe Network roster, please check them out. And on their social media platforms at Pipe Network. And syempre, please, paki-follow din ako. Syempre, sa Twitter, Instagram, AG Penera. I'm going to repeat that. And, yun lang. So, this week's podcast, I want to thank everyone who is listening to this podcast nga pala. So, nag-pick ulit tayo sa Spotify and sa Apple Podcasts as the number 4 wrestling podcast in the Philippines sa Apple Podcast rankings. So that's a blast for me as of today's recording. So as of today's recording, number 13 tayo sa rankings. It's a plus then for me, big pleasure na katabi ko yung isa sa mga pioneers ng Philippine Wrestling Podcast, Wrestling, and si Bruce Pritchard of WWE obviously. So it's a plus for me. And personally, I want to thank everyone who is listening to my podcast since 2020. And marami pa kayong dapat abangan sa podcast na to. Since 5 episodes na lang to before the episode 100. And syempre, ilang buwan na lang anniversary na ulit ng podcast. So 2 years na tong podcast. Marami kayong dapat abangan sa podcast na to. So yeah, that's pretty much it for this week's podcast. Remember, stay safe, stay reso, please. Kung hindi pa kayo nagpapabaksin, utang na loob, baka naman magpabaksin na kayo. And on May 2022, wag po tayo boboto ng sinungaling, magnanakaw, mamamatay tao. At higit sa lahat, yung hindi sumisipot sa debate. Yun lamang po. Thank you. See you on the next episode.
I like to have a good time when I listen to my horror podcast.
Her left arm
Oh,
was
that's
chopped
so.
off.
Oh my god, really?
Caused a panic all over the
Prolonged
country.
their deaths for like months and
The
months.
frightening, alarming, real-life tale show is my horror
My
podcast.
horror podcast. That's
Give
it?
Pause it.
This is your scary part?
Be scared and laugh hard with the frightening, alarming, real-life tales show every Friday on all major podcasting platforms. Don't say I didn't warn you.
Did you know that podcasts are the new radio? You can listen to your favorite shows anytime, anywhere on demand. Visit the Pilipinas Indie Podcast and Entertainment Network at pipenetwork.co to see our list of shows. And like us on Facebook to get updates on our latest episodes, events, promos, and freebies. The Pipe Network, taking podcasting to the next level.